Hello and welcome. You're listening to Metal Verbalizers and I am Johan. Today I will verbalize the death metal band Sentient Horror from New Jersey, USA. The band was founded in 2014 by Matt Molidi as a one-man band known as Sentient. But in 2016, when the band was about to release their debut album titled Ungodly Forms, they changed the name by adding horror to prevent any confusion with another band also known as Sentient. This was also the time when Sentient Horror went from a solo thing to a proper band with a full lineup. The band Sentient Horror is very influenced by old school Swedish death metal bands such as Dismember, Entombed and Edge of Sanity. But they're also very influenced by bands such as Carcass and Death, especially early era Death, I would assume. The band has also explained that they believe their earlier releases were more influenced by the kind of like Swedish old school death metal style, and influences such as what I previously mentioned, like Carcass and Death, for example, are a little bit more prominent in their later releases. So, well, I suppose the conclusion we could make here is that if you kind of prefer mostly the kind of old school, like Swedish type of death metal, I would probably recommend that maybe you check out the earlier releases by Sentient Horror, and if you prefer more like death metal styles such as the ones that bands such as Carcass and Death are going for, maybe you should start by checking out Sentient Horror's later releases. So I think it kind of depends a little bit about what kind of death metal style you personally generally prefer, but in general, I suppose if you like death metal in general, I think you will definitely like any releases by Sentient Horror, really. But I mean, the way that I'm kind of seeing it with the like earlier or later releases kind of makes sense to me in a way. And in general, I would also say it's like if you like any of the previously mentioned bands, such as Dismember, Entombed, Carcass, Edge of Sanity, or Death, I'm absolutely sure that you will really like Sentient Horror. When it comes to the band's album art, Sentient Horror's concept is to kind of like make a visualization of the title track's lyrics. So it's kind of like the theme for Morbid Realms is a kind of like type of hellish Lovecraftian landscape, you know. So that's what the album's art is like meant to look like, to really like, you know, kind of like visualize how like a hellish Lovecraftian landscape would probably look like. And you know, like for a record such as Rites of Gore, it's about like a necromantic ritual to raise the dead, you know. So basically that's what that album art looks like, you know. It's like, you know, a cemetery in the darkness with some dead looking trees and you know, a zombie wearing a robe standing on top of a grave while staring down on several other zombies that are being you know, raised from the dead, I suppose. It looks very sinister and evil, but Sentient Horror is not going for like a very gory image, if you know what I mean, when it comes to album art. You know, they have songs such as Until Death Do Us Rot, stuff like that. So they have that, like, you know, kind of like classic gory death metal stuff, but but not in their album art, which is something I personally really appreciate. I'm not saying that bands that are making gory album covers or something like that are doing anything wrong like that, but I tend to prefer this kind of style, you know, that Sentient Horror is going for here. You know, like, something else that I thought about as well that I kind of like really want to mention here is that while I'm not certain if it is intentional or not, I can't help but to think of you know the album cover for Death's album, debut album, Scream Bloody Gore. When seeing the album cover for this album by Sentient Horror, you know, like with the kind of like I suppose Sentient Horror is more like zombie looking, while Death had more like of skulls wearing robes, but you know, it still made me kind of like think about that when I saw this album cover, and you know, considering Death, as I mentioned earlier, is a big influence for Sentient Horror. I guess this wouldn't be so far-fetched if the album cover for Rise of Gore is indeed kind of like, you know, influenced by Scream Bloody Gore, with the robes and stuff like that. So I don't know, it's just like a spontaneous thought I had when seeing it. Personally, I really love this concept. I believe I mentioned it earlier that I really love it when bands do it like that, you know, that when there is a direct connection between stuff like the album art, the title of an album, like lyrics, etc. You know, when you can really like clearly tell a direct connection between those things that it's kind of like it becomes a whole full package, you know, and that's something I really like, and definitely, you know, such as Sentient Horror is kind of like doing here, is a very good example of that, in my opinion. Speaking of lyrics, by the way that Sentient Horror makes their lyrics are really inspired by King Diamond, it seems, and kind of like the way that he has written his lyrics over the time. Like Sentient Horror has told me that they have no interest in like writing lyrics about real subject, you know, like subjects in real life, like reality and stuff like that. And that Sentient Horror is a band that really like kind of prefers the sort of like escapism, I suppose you could call it. That like they prefer to write fiction and kind of going for sort of like a similar short horror story style that kind of like King Diamond has done. The like Sentient Horror mostly prefer that approach, and while me personally can see the kind of like point with both sides of the coin, you know, but I can definitely appreciate, you know, the kind of like approach that Sentient Horror is going for here. And it's kind of like it's a very common like idea with metal music, and you know, like metal as like a community, really, that it's kind of like about, you know, escaping the bullshit of you know, everyday life and society and whatnot, and you know, like going the kind of like path that Sentient Horror is going here with like full on fiction. Like I really appreciate that, and to me, having like a concept and like an approach like that makes total sense. But I would also like to kind of like mention something about the future, so to speak. For the future, Sentient Horror is hard at work with their 4th full-length release that they have said that it will be released at some point next year, in 2024. They did not tell me when exactly, but sometime next year. They're also planning to make a proper US tour to support that album, actually. But until then, they are planning to keep touring in like the northeastern USA. So basically, if you're living there in the northeastern part of USA, where they will be playing, you should definitely show up to at least one of their shows. I highly encourage you to do that. And then, I don't know, then you can go to our comments or something and brag to me about it. Or something like that. But with that being said, I believe that it's time to wrap this up. And as always, I appreciate you listening. And if you like this episode, then make sure to follow us at Metal Verbalizers. And we will make sure to keep giving you more episodes like this one. And if this episode will result in you checking this band out, then please tag us and let us know. We would appreciate it a lot, and it is a great way to both support us, but also the bands that we're talking about. We will be back to you next week with another Verbalization.